My name is Curtis Wallaschuk. I'm the Associate Director of Programming at the Vancouver International Film Festival. Welcome back to Totally Indie Day in this Indie Spirit session. We are extremely excited to have four filmmakers join us today who've released some of the truly most talked about and acclaimed work on the festival circuit for the past year. We have Jessica Beshir, who is the director of Faya Beshir. It's a documentary that really immerses us in the ritual of cut. Her short documentary, He Who Dances on Wood, played hot dogs and it won the top prize in Edmonton, just east of us, some years back. And she returned to hot dogs with this film this year and scored the audience award with it. Nicole Riegel is the director of Holler. It's the story of a young woman who tries to fund her university education through very dangerous means. This film played South by Southwest, it played TIFF last year as well, and many other esteemed festivals. She won the Director to Watch Award at the Palm Springs Film Festival, and she's currently at work on her second feature film, Dandelion. Anna Mensa has the film Queen of Glory at the festival this year, and we're very excited to have that both on our screens and our VIFF Connect platform. It's about an Ivy Leaguer who must return to the Bronx to put her mother's affairs in order. This is her directorial debut. It premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival, where it won Best New Director. And finally, Megan Park, writer-director of The Fallout, which examines the emotional ramifications of a high school tragedy. She wrote and directed this film. It premiered at South by Southwest this year, where it won both the Grand Jury Prize and Audience Award for narrative features. And she was also the recipient of the Bright Cove Illumination Award. And we are, I think, are contractually obliged to mention she is Canadian. So we thank all four of our filmmakers for joining us. Welcome all four of you to the Vancouver International Film Festival, albeit by virtual means. We're so happy that you could join us today and speak a little bit more about your films and hopefully impart some wisdom to the emerging filmmakers of British Columbia.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really curious to know, and hopefully some viewers are as well, what was the first maybe like kernel of inspiration that set you on the path for each of you making the films that emerged on the festival circuit this past year, and maybe how did the final film diverge most markedly from like that first idea that put it into motion? And if only because I introduced you first, Jessica, and I know you just saw your film on screen, I'm curious for you, like what were the beginnings of Faya Beshir for yourself?
Well, you know, the beginning was I had been away from Ethiopia for a long time, and I started, you know, when I first went back was to connect with my grandmother, who's getting very, very old. And also she had messages for my father, who's also out of the country. And those messages were basically like, come back. But I had bought a small camcorder that I was recording her. So I was bringing those messages. And in a way, that camcorder sort of allowed me to really begin to reconnect, you know, with her and, you know, later on also with the country and with my friends and family at large. So that was sort of the genesis of how it started and how I even started to think that I could, you know, make a film. And also, you know, the film came because I had so many questions, so many things had changed in the country when I was not, you know, for all of those years, over 15 years. So in trying to figure out those questions and also, again, connecting again to that place that I had left, that was the beginning of the film.
And Nicole, I know that there was a short Holler that preceded the feature, but so you've kind of looked at this story, this world for some time, and what drew you into it initially?
Yeah, you know, it started. There's the short and the feature are so different. My short film was really an exercise in filming in a scrapyard and how I'd never done that before, and how to even attempt to film in a completely uncontrolled environment, and while merging non-professional actors and professional actors. But I guess the idea for Holler, the feature, because it's such a semi-autobiographical story, really just began with wanting to tell a story about my own beginnings and how hard it was to grow up in Southeast Ohio and pursue an education as a high school student wanting to go to college at the time, and unpacking the challenges of that that I was facing at the time, but didn't understand as a 17-year-old young woman in America. And then, many years later, having the perspective and, a tiny bit of wisdom sometime later, being able to sort of look back at 17-year-old me and see all of the systemic challenges that prevented me from doing that. And wanted to unpack that in a feature film.
It's funny, I suppose, because your film is so rooted in this kind of authenticity of Ohio. And then Nana, in your film, Ohio exists as this kind of location that it's almost more conceptual, if you will. And so curious for yourself in that regard, like this film that's really fixated in or situated in the Bronx, what were some kind of like your key entry points into the narrative and wanting to explore that world and really flesh it out?
Sure, yeah. It's Nana, by the way, Curtis. That's okay. I wanted, you're right, Ohio exists as this almost like, nirvana, or this other place where beautiful things are going to happen.
I appreciate that.
Yes, yeah, I give Ohio props in my film. Yes, my film takes place in the Bronx, and I think conceptually, it was really important to me. Similar to you, Nicole, actually, I was working with both a hybrid of professional actors and non-actors. And because I wanted that flavor, I wanted that real, I wanted it to really resonate and feel like the Bronx that I was familiar with. And because, as I've said before, a lot of times when you say you're making a film about a Christian bookstore in the Bronx, people are like, oh, the Bronx, like, are there guns, and whatnot. And that was just kind of something that I felt the need to push back against, because I think a lot of times the stereotypes that come with various environs are fallacious. And so I really wanted to just kind of showcase the very normcore middle-class Bronxiness of, my family and a lot of other families in New York. I don't know if I answered your question, Curtis. What was your question?
I think that's a wonderful answer to that question as to what motivated you to tell the story. And I guess that leaves Megan, and really curious for the follow-up. I mean, I don't know if you drew from your experiences on screen in terms of envisioning this tale, but maybe you can lead us through your path to, I guess, the South by Southwest premiere this past spring.
Yeah, I mean, it was such an emotional that I have not been through, very lucky to have not been through a high school shooting or a shooting, but I think that I was really scared and I couldn't stop thinking about the reality of high school students in America. I didn't grow up in that time. I grew up in a small town in Canada, and I was never scared to go to school every day. And I guess I felt like the story hadn't been told in the way I would like to try to approach it. But truthfully, I was really scared to do it because I felt like, being Canadian, I wasn't the right person. Somebody who hadn't been through it, I wasn't the right person. And I was scared to make a movie that was going to make somebody want to go and shoot somebody. And there was so many, I didn't want to make it political. So there was a lot of reasons why I didn't want to do it at first. But I guess for me, this Veda was sort of my interpretation of, I feel like, how I would cope with something like this. And, I was so inspired by the Emma Gonzalez's and these people who'd done such amazing things, but I couldn't stop thinking about the people who weren't able to channel what they'd been through into that kind of amazing change, and just kind of felt crippled with the anxiety to move forward. And so I just, I did my research after I had written it, because I wanted to just write it from my gut, and spoke to lots of people who had been through it to make sure that it tracked and made some changes. But I had very lucky to have not been through something like that.
It, not to be pejorative about this, but I think there are some people who approach screenwriting and kind of pitching things like this, trying to kind of tune into like that hot button subject or something that's like very much in the zeitgeist. And I think all four of these films are notable for the fact that they diverge from that tremendously. I don't know that there's studio executives out there that are looking for stories of a Christian bookshop in the Bronx, or with a working class in Ohio. And I mean, it's a difficult road for a filmmaker at any point in time. And I'm I guess curious to hear from any of you just about how you kind of maintain the courage of your convictions in terms of this being, the film you're going to push on with when it wasn't maybe like that low-hanging fruit that an investor or someone else would really want to snatch at.
Well, I'll go first just because my situation was unique, because even though my story is not autobiographical, I have family that has a Christian bookstore in the Bronx. And so part of when I was kind of like the kernel of the story, like you were speaking about before, Curtis, is like, I knew from good advice from mentors and things like that, that like your first feature, do what you can to shoot around things that you can get for cheap or free. And that is a way to maintain some of that control, so that if you don't have that big investor with the deep pockets that's going to just sign the multi-million-dollar check for you to go live your dreams, you can still get by. You can still eke out a story. It may not be, super well funded, well resourced, but there's a way. And so that was actually a big part of me telling this story. I was like, well, I know my family owns a Christian bookstore in the Bronx. I'm going to set most of my actions there. I know that it's closed on Sundays because, everyone who usually goes there is at church. So I'm going to make sure that all of my Sundays, are there, and I can get, I can maximize those things, which, again, with the audience that you're saying is emerging filmmakers, that's like my biggest piece, the best piece of advice that I received. So I feel the need to pass it on.
For yourself, maybe Nicole, in terms of like developing the story and knowing that, this is, there are those films certainly on the festival circuit that I think they're specific to the region in which they unfold, but there is some universality in the narratives as well. And just curious, as you did develop the Holler feature film, was it just a matter of you staying true to the vision that you had for it and operating on faith that it would connect with a larger audience?
Yeah, it was a lot of faith. It was a long 5-year journey, and I don't think, there wasn't a lab or a film institute that didn't support me or support this film. I took all the support I could get. I think they ran out of support for me. It still wasn't enough to get the film made, and taking less and less money. And, I also made the film in a place that I knew like the back of my hand. And a lot of those choices were out of necessity and knowing my own backyard and knowing, okay, if I can shoot in my hometown, I can incorporate these people I've known all my life. Like, a lot of that sounds really hard, but those things actually made the film easier. I didn't have access to a lot of things. I couldn't call a lot of people. I couldn't, call my parents to, as I think a lot of people can you give me hundreds of thousands of dollars for my movie? Like, I didn't have access to the world of filmmaking at all, but I knew very talented people, but they weren't the names that I think bring in a lot of dollars. And then, I met a couple people who, are very notable people, and they just believed in me and they helped me. And I think that's absolutely how Holler attracted some of those names that because of people like Abigail and Paul helping me. But so I did receive some breaks along the way, but that was after years of no breaks at all and no access. But I think it was just the secret to, how do you keep going for 5 years is just, I needed to tell the story. I think that's a story you should tell. I think my biggest fear is that I pursue something for a few years and fall out of love with it. I think you have to make something that you're so in love with that you can endure 5 years or more of no's, because you don't, as far as I understand it, live forever. So you're here for a limited amount of time. you should pursue that thing that you want to get up and fight for every day. And that's like my attitude in filmmaking. And I think you kind of have to have it if you're making these scrappy movies.
And I appreciate you reminding us all of our own mortality as well.
Yes. I might be wrong. I don't know.
We'll see, right? We'll see. Everything's changing. Jessica, for yourself, you mentioned that there was these questions you had that kind of set you on the course of making the documentary. And was it kind of the continual search for answers that pushed you on? Because you served a lot of roles on this film yourself. And so you perhaps, I don't know what your support system looked like outside of yourself, or was it very much like almost a singular journey as you continued on this search for answers?
A lot of what you're saying, truly. But, I have to say, I didn't really know I was going to make this film. When I first started to go back, it's an idea that slowly started to emerge, but only as I was connecting and as I was shooting. I didn't really know anyone in the industry. It took me 10 years to make this film, I have footage that date back to 2010, that is in the film. So it's really incredible, to me to even look back and realize that this film was finally, it's finally out, But I want to say that there's something about truly, not knowing what it truly takes. Because when I first started to have this idea and questions about chat, because I grew up in Harar and I grew up with chata around us. It's an organic and natural thing in a way, but finding that chat had become the most important economic force and that all lives evolved around it. The topography, the landscape, everything was chat, So my impulse was just to go and shoot and find out and connect, right? So once I started to see some footage, my thought was like, okay, how am I going to make this film? I started to realize this could be a film. And, so my shooting became more about, okay, because I kept hearing, you need a producer, you need a DP, you need a crew, you need everyone. And so time went by, I wasn't getting a producer, I wasn't getting a DP, I was definitely not getting any funding. And I started to realize that I was becoming my own DP. I was becoming my own producer. I was becoming my own director. I was becoming my own everything. So it's something that I realized, because even until, halfway, I was still shooting so that I could show and finally get some funding so that I could hire, right? But then once I realized, it's a journey of realizations. I realized that this had become, or I had taken it as my opportunity to learn. And I became the student. I became obsessed with cinematography. I became obsessed with producing. All of those things that, one needs to learn. Also, because once I started to have a little bit more footage to show, and I started to speak with producers, then other questions came, because the producer had an idea, or the several producers had an idea of what this film needed to be. And a lot of it were other structures that had already been perhaps successful. And so, the questions that I was being asked, like, okay, where are the drug lords, and what are we exposing? And so, where's the conflict, for example? So, and that I realized was not the film that I wanted to make. It was not about exposing, For me, it was something else altogether. And that's when I realized that it was going to take a while, but that's when I found my resolve in a way. I felt like it was so important for me to maintain that integrity that I wanted to bring into my work, and that no funding was going to give me that. That's number one. And what I didn't find in funding, I found it in the community support, because this whole film was led and by the collaboration that I had with the communities. Because once they saw me enough, year after year after year, people start like saying, okay, you are committed. So yeah, something like that.
That was lovely. Megan, I'm curious because maybe building off what Jessica said about sometimes making a film being a journey of realizations, and you mentioned earlier, your desire to do a lot of research to ensure that you were, I guess, being respectful and responsible with scenarios like this. Were there realizations or revelations that came to light for you during the writing process, and then did those maybe change once you were on set with your cast and crew?
I would say the realizations came a lot more in the post-production and the editing and the filming than necessarily the writing for me. I feel like it was interesting because, again, we didn't have a lot of money, and people thought, oh, you had Shailene Woodley. I was like, she was working for free, because she was a friend and she believed in the project. And so it was the same sort of issues, but at the same time, the blessing I see in that now, looking back, is there weren't a lot of people like looking over my shoulder, like telling me what I could and couldn't do, which was such a gift from my first film, to be able to try so hard to make it authentic to what I wanted it to be. But that's not to say there weren't, still opinions. And especially with a subject like school shooting, people have very strong opinions about how that should go, and political agendas they might want to push through. And trying to retain the focus on what the heart of this story was really difficult, to kind of stay on track to that and stay true to that. And, the ending and people being like, that's too dark. And, there's just so many opinions along the way. And, learning through the editing process, and now through watching these kind of marketing meetings and screenings and hearing feedback, learning so much about, that you can't make everybody happy, and what is it that you're making it for, and who is it you're making it for ultimately. So I guess it was a real learning experience, and from taking notes and and how do you take those in, and how do you weed through what is good and helpful, and what is maybe straying too far from what you started out to make. That's been a really insightful process, and something that will definitely carry through into hopefully when I get to make my next film. But it's hard, it's very hard. And especially when you do have people giving you, we did have a little bit of money to make the movie. And so you do have to listen to voices, and it's the writing part is actually the most pure part for me. That's where I get to just like be in Canada in my house and and just do. And I didn't get paid to write the movie. So I got to write the script I wanted to write, which was, looking back, I'm so grateful for that.
I guess you don't get paid to write, but you also don't have to worry about budgetary restrictions and things like this when you write.
There's a silver lining in that, yeah.
Running headlong into those realities once you're actually in production. I was curious to hear from both yourself, Megan, and Nana, about the how much your work in front of the camera as actors maybe informed your directing style as well. So maybe Megan, if you want to start with that, then we can switch over.
So much. I didn't act in the project, but it would, and now I'm doing more writing and directing and don't really have as much desire to act anymore. But what I think I learned so much I didn't even realize is I'm just so comfortable on a set. I know what everybody does. And I feel like I've been in front of the camera for so many years. I started acting professionally when I was 15. And especially it's all young actors. Everybody was like under 18, basically, except for the parents in my movie. And I was that for so many years and kind of understand what that feels like. And I really wanted to empower the young woman in the movie to feel really safe to explore and just like have lots of fun. And I think I had learned what directors didn't make me feel that way and what directors did make me feel that way. So I tried to channel that. And every actor is so different and needs something so different. And I think that working with so many different personalities in front of the camera for so many years allowed me to quickly pick up on no two actors are the same, and some people need nothing, some people need a lot, and it's kind of figuring that out very quickly, especially when you're shooting a movie in like 20 days and you have no time. And we were actually shooting the movie very early on during COVID, pre-vaccine, pre all of that, so we didn't get any rehearsal. I only got to FaceTime with people. Nobody was ever in the room together before. I was directing the movie from a back room with a monitor, with a facial, with a mask. I didn't even get to interact with my actors most of the time in person. I was FaceTiming them, giving them notes. I was texting with Jenna. It was tricky, but it's also a blessing that I'd spent so many time on. It wasn't my first time on set doing that, would have been extra hard. But I think it's really benefited me for the most part in working with actors and all different types of personalities and needs.
Let's see. I think, wait, what was the question?
I was curious for yourself, having been an actor, if that, knowing what is demanded of cast members sometimes, if that ended up informing how you work as a director, as your kind of directorial practice, and the kind of the space you want to create on set for people to work with it.
Am I frozen?
I think you might be back now.
Okay, I'm back. Okay. No, I think being an actor, one of the things that was, because I come from the more theatrical tradition, like I theater is my base. I was New York based until recently. And like, it is always kind of shocking as a stage person to get on set and see how little handholding there is. I feel like an actor can, in theater, can go to their director, can go to the writer, the playwright, and just be like, okay, so like, what do you think is happening here? Like, let's talk it, like, let's rap, like whatever, and on set, they're like, stand there, say that, ready, like usually, and the only time I found a kind of departure from that norm is working with directors who are actors. And so I tried to be that, because I do think that it is such a wonderfully collaborative art form, but I really wanted to be in dialogue with my actors about like what was happening and why, and especially also I think when you get on sets where the lead actor is also the director, is also the writer, there's kind of, you're the judge, the jury, and the executioner. And so it's a little bit tough for people to feel like if they can approach you. And I wanted to very much make sure that people recognize that I was like open, ask me questions. If something doesn't make sense, like come to me, like I'm not like in some ivory tower somewhere. Like I'm here, I'm in the trenches with you. So I think that probably informed how, the tenor on set.
And in turn, I wanted to ask Nicole and Jessica about the aesthetic approaches to your films. So Nicole, yours is, I think it's shot on Super 16. Is that right? And then Jessica, yours has this like fantastic kind of monochromatic look to it. Possesses this fantastic monochromatic look that kind of seems fantastical in a sense, but also very grounded. So maybe Nicole, first of all, curious to know about the decision to shoot on film and what kind of lured you to that aesthetic choice for the narrative you wanted to tell.
Yeah, and Jessica, you did something I've always wanted to do, is just shoot in black and white. Your film looks delicious. It's just
Thank
beautiful.
you.
Yeah, I mean, I love film. I love 16 in particular, and I wanted the film to kind of reflect the community that feels very left behind where we made the film. Whether they are or they aren't, they feel left behind in the world. And so that was sort of the driving force behind 16. But I also just think it's very, very visceral and tangible, and I've always loved it. And it comes with its own set of challenges. One, being, most people say it's too expensive, and it sort of is and it isn't. It is, however, I found so many people, camera houses and places like Kodak and Panavision and Photochem, who were just so generous to us, and they just love when new filmmakers come along and want to shoot on film. And if any new filmmakers are out there wanting to shoot on film and worried about the cost, there are so many like places that will help you and just wrap their arms around you and make it affordable for you. I think that's something maybe people don't say as much. And it wasn't just my experience. I have lots of friends who've also had that experience. There are so many resources to make that possible. And I think the biggest challenge with shooting on 16 or any film is just, days and time, and you can't do 20 takes of something, but that's my style. That works for me. I could, 3 or 4 takes and really knowing what you need to get and having a very strict plan. You can have flexibility, but really, not just shot listing, but I sort of storyboarded everything far in advance with the cinematographer and everyone on the team, so that if things changed or locations fell through, as they did almost every day on the film, we knew what we had to at least find and capture and could pivot to something easily that didn't change what we needed to get in front of the camera. So you just have to be just very expert in your planning for film and being very cognizant of film economy every day. I think for actors, some love film. I think there are some who maybe never want to work on a film that's shooting on film ever again. And I completely understand both perspectives on that. But I just love I think my favorite thing about film is that it forces you to know what you want. For everyone's very alert on the set because nobody wants to waste someone's time and money and waste film. And it just really forces everyone in every department and sharpens even the actors, but especially me as a director, to know what you want and to be very decisive every single day. And I love that about film. I don't know that I would feel comfortable on a set where we're doing 20, 30, 40 takes and, everyone and their uncle gets a take. Like, I don't know that I would be comfortable with that. I love the focus that celluloid forces on a team.
And Jessica, you mentioned, that for much of this process, or the preliminary stages at least, you always were anticipating handing this over to a director of photography and other roles. But did you know from the outset that you wanted this monochromatic look to the finished film?
Yeah, that was one of the early decisions. It was very intentional in a way, because as soon as when I began shooting, I started to realize also what is the story that I wanted to tell. And a lot of it really was informed by the place itself, by the spirituality of the place, by that very Sufi philosophy in a way in which, I really wanted to talk about an interior story, an interior landscape, an interior everything. And I'm shooting in the most colorful cities in the world. Harar is one of the most colorful cities, but then that was not, in a way, the story that I was going for. And when it comes to the shooting, I have to say that, the limitation, the way I was shooting was informed by that limit, knowing what my limits were in a way, it led me to make creative decisions. For example, I shot, my film on a DSLR, on a 5D Mark II. And I had one fast lens, my Zeiss planner 1.4, and that's it. I was going to go for it. I have a few other lenses, but that was just my go-to lens, because also, again, those limitations, then you work around that. Then you have to move. Then you have to, so it informs, how you, it truly informed how I was shooting. And also it forced me to focus and try to truly learn what this light was doing, what the shadows were doing, what the times of the day and when I wanted to shoot and so forth. So truly that was my teacher, the limitation in a way. So it's not until probably I started shooting 2010 and until 2018 that I got a friend of mine sold me his old C300. C301. So I upgraded a little bit for bigger shots, but those were my babies, and there was something really beautiful about having to work with these, yes, of course, my gosh, my dream 16 or a film or this or that, but that's not what I had. I was committed to truly do something with this little DSLR and try to squeeze as much as I could off of it,
Can I just piggyback something Nicole just said, because I saw a 40-year-old version at Sundance 2020, and I remember in the Q&A, Rada Blank was like, because she shot on film in black and white, and I remember asking, I was like, yeah, but wasn't that expensive? In my head, because I knew I was shooting digital and it was still expensive, but and she was like, well, actually you end up saving on color correct, and there are ways, and then also you can, what you were saying, Nicole, there are houses that will work with you. There are ways to kind of make it, happen. And so she said that, and I was like, oh my God, I could have shot on film, so I've made a mental note to myself that I want to shoot on film next. I want to investigate it seriously next time.
That's awesome.
Kodak better stock up.
Yeah.
Everyone's coming for their stockpile.
Yes.
You mentioned the advice you received about, use the locations you have, things like this. And I'm wondering, for anyone on the panel right now, was there a critical piece of advice that you received in the making of this film that really either helped put it in motion or maybe steer it into the direction where it ended as well, or maybe even it came earlier in your kind of creative development, like one kind of critical piece of information that you'd love to share with a larger group of people?
I want to say one of the, I was accumulating all of this footage for a long time, and the time came when I needed to edit. And for that, you cannot save up for the edit. That's so much money, there was no way. And that's when, the funding started to become very critical. But what someone said was, try to make a short film so that you can introduce yourself, because I truly knew no one. So that was so important for me, because I ended up locating, a part of my footage that something that we could edit into a short film and could be a standalone. So that I could, again, show any work, because I had nothing to show. So that became a short film that we applied to Sundance, and it got accepted. And that truly helped me a lot in terms of, again, showing my work, showing something, okay, this is more or less what I'm about. This is more or less what I'm trying to do with this longer piece. That led me to be invited to certain workshops, to certain, I don't know, it really, I have to say that it opened a door, and it was like a 6-minute and 39-second short film. So making a short film was very important for me.
I think one of the things a producer on Holler said to me, which didn't mean a whole lot at the time, but became something that I think about all the time now, which was we were facing some challenge on the film. We were facing challenges every single day in making this film up until its release. And he said every film is its own adventure. Mm-hmm. And I think I was and still I'm always, but especially during the 5-year journey of Holler, I would look to other people who had made films before me and think, well, how did they make their film, and try to emulate that. I was just desperate to try to figure out how to make my first film. And because it seemed like nobody was helping me for years. And I would take their advice, how they made their film, and it wouldn't work. Or I'd take advice from someone else and it wouldn't work. Or someone's like, well, you got to do this, or you got to cast this person, or you have to cast this person, you have to shoot it on digital, you have to have this happen in the film. And I kept chasing all of this advice. And then it hit me, every film, when he said that to me, every film really is its own adventure. And the rules you apply to your first film maybe won't be true for your second film or your third film. And every film really is its own adventure. And it was just something that really stuck with me and still helps me.
We have our, oh, sorry, go ahead, Megan.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I would say that I feel like there's this pressure to like know everything. And it's so much easier if you can just know that you don't have to know everything. Like you have to know some things and you have to know what you want and you have to know what you want to get. But I think that if you can leave space for, if you can bring in people that believe in your project and that are good at what they do, and you give them the space to do it, then that's when like the magic happens. You know, I think that, I don't know, I've heard a lot of people try to control things like this is like my movie and everything. But I think if you can come at it with a more relaxed attitude of everything is so out of your control, and like the script is one thing, what you get on set is something else, and what you do with it in the edit is, they're three different movies really in one, the whole process. And if you can trust your gut and hire really great people in each department and then give them space to bring their best creativity to it, and know, you know, I think that's when, you know, really great things happen, and to take that pressure off yourself, especially because I feel like, you know, if I was, I don't know who told me that, if somebody told me that along the way, and it really stuck with me, and it really helped, I think, take some of the stress off and create magic that I could have never created, and added so much to the project.
We do have our first question from the audience. This question is about Queen of Glory. It comes from Rosie. She says, I saw Queen of Glory last night and I loved it. Throughout the film, the drums have such a huge impact on the score. I'm curious to know if you imagined the score while you were writing the scenes.
I didn't. I did not imagine the score when I was writing the scenes. Actually, one part that was not drum related. Actually, okay, I have two answers for this. One part that I did envision some music was the Moses Sumney song that's playing in the beginning, the love scene with Sarah and Lyle. So that was one part where I had a thought of what I wanted to do. The second, but with the drums, I did know that critically in that big cultural funeral, the Ashanti traditional funeral, that was going to be the soundtrack for sure, because that is what the soundtrack is in these funerals. So I had a pretty strong sense of that. But everything in between, I was like, and so we luckily got a great music supervisor who helped me, you know, kind of figure out what it was that I wanted to say and help lift what was happening.
The next question, I think, is for the entire panel. After coming up with the seed of an idea for a film, what is the first thing you do next? So I guess that first lightning bolt of inspiration strikes.
I would say I don't write anything for a long time. I spend a lot of time thinking about the story and the characters way before I ever write down a word. I would say I thought about the fallout for close to a year before I ever wrote it. And then I wrote it in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because I'd spent so much time figuring out who these people were, and it takes so long. And that's still the struggle for me when I'm writing an idea, is you feel like you're not being productive if you're not like writing 10 pages, you know? But sometimes like the real work comes from me, like, I just need to take a walk and just like think about what I'm doing for a minute. And I find for me, that's always where the real work is, in a way, in the writing process.
Exactly the same.
So let the seed germinate for a while, I guess, to push the metaphor. What is the one piece of advice that you have for aspiring female directors?
I have two pieces of advice that I'm just regurgitating that I've received. One was what I said earlier about shooting around what you can get for cheap or free. Don't write something that's $100 million that like, you know, that you're going to need Fox to come and bankroll. Like, write something modest, write something accessible for you. And then hire your friends, hire the people that who know you and love you, and like build that filmmaking family together. I think that's the best way. The other piece of advice I have is, I'm sorry guys, my short-term memory is shot. I just had a baby, so I'm like really just not present. The second piece of advice that I have is to, yes, okay, is my first call in regards to the other question. Like when I have that with Queen of Glory, I had the idea for the film. I started kind of putting some things down in my notes section on my phone, like very casually, but not like sitting down to write, to concretize it. And I called a producer friend who's also my first cousin. And I asked him what he thought. And I kind of lightly pitched the idea and asked for advice. And I just think that is a big, big thing for me. Don't be, this person is clearly not, but don't be afraid to ask for advice. A lot of times we get into this weird, scarcity mindset of like, I can't tell you my idea. I can't tell you what I'm doing. Like, you know, and I don't think that's totally helpful. I think it's okay to share what you're working on, even if it does take you 5-10 years, like, you know, share what you're working on and don't be afraid to say it. You know, I have friends who are like, I'm a waiter. It's like, no, you're not a waiter. You're an actor. You know, you happen to wait tables but you're an actor, you know, and so just like own the thing, and don't be afraid to ask for advice.
Our next question, very easy one. What is your favorite and least favorite part of the film industry?
Fundraising sucks. Fundraising sucks so bad.
I would say my least favorite is the value put on actors. And I think it's a very, I think it's largely a very American thing. Like I strongly dislike hearing, well, here are the actors who are valuable. To me, the most talented person for the role is invaluable. That's who's valuable to me, is who, as a director, is how talented you are, not this person has, you know, 3 million people following them on Twitter, which is very popular now to give, if you're an actor, to have someone submit your social followings. But as me as a director, I could care less about that. So just the value placed on actors, I deeply empathize with them and think it's a nasty conversation that we have about them. My favorite thing is really my collaboration with all of the department heads and the actors when you're in that early stage of figuring out the lenses you're going to use, the palettes, just those conversations with my partners on the film. It's just my favorite part.
Yeah, I would say my favorite part is being on set, like the actual filming part of it, that collaborative, you know, feeling as well. And yeah, all the buildup, like all the pre-pro is so exciting. And my least favorite is just, yeah, all the like producer BS is like very stressful. I've actually been asked to be taken off those emails because it gets weird. It gets weird. There's a lot of stuff I did not know about that goes on behind the scenes with like that whole side of it that I don't want any part of.
I want to say something not about this one, but about the previous question about for women filmmakers. I don't know if I have any like specific advice, but I would like to say that for me, one of the things that was so crucial and so important was to be part of other women filmmaking groups. Joining those groups helped me a lot in a way where one, the solidarity and camaraderie is amazing. And then number two, it truly helped me to identify how at times collaboration or part of this industry could be a bit toxic, you know, in a way where it really aims at your sense of self and what you are about, you know? So that also helped me a lot in a way where here you are trying to make a film and everybody's telling you, like no, or this or that, or, you hear it so much all around, especially when you're a woman too, because then you are dealing with a lot of ego around. So it's about a lot of self-empowerment and within community, and about trying to practice truly this radical self-trust, because I found that there were a lot of voices around me that were creating these doubts that didn't need to be there, So I feel that for me as a woman filmmaker, belonging to, especially I belong to Brown Girl Doc Mafia, for example. This has been an incredible, incredible group of supportive women that, and when it comes to resources, when it comes to advice, when it comes to everything, it's such a creative, safe space that I found for myself that truly was very supportive in my making this film, for 10 years, so that was one thing. And another one would be applying to grants, whether I got it or not. What I realized that it was forcing me to articulate what I was trying to make, and that was very valuable regardless of whether I got the grant or not. So, yeah.
I think listening to your gut is really important, just kind of what you were saying about about protecting because one of the to connect both questions, one of the most joyous things for me was like being in the edit hour, like 6 on an 8-hour day. Like I loved my editor. I love my creative producers. We had such a great shorthand. We loved working together. We want to work together on something else. And that wasn't by accident. Like I got really great vibes from those people in the interview process. And that allowed us to kind of create this fellowship. So go with your gut, even if like a very fancy person with whatever their IMDb, it could be like a Dead Sea Scroll, but like, don't hire them just because of what it says on IMDb or what it says on Google. Like hire the people that you actually connect with, because it's a very long road, as you're hearing here from Nicole, from Jessica, like from me, it's a really long road, and you want to be in the trenches with people who get you and get what you're trying to do and who you vibe with. So I think that's really, really important, to not be dazzled by, the lights, the shiny things. Like really go for the people who are right for your project.
Well, our 1 hour has flown past, so we thank all 4 of you for taking the time today to talk and to share from your own experiences. It was wonderful to have you here with us, and we wish you all the best with the films as they continue to find their way out into the world and connect with audiences.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.